I'm so, honored to be asked to do this. It's really just such a pleasure. And I just want to say thank you to Mandy and to Rachel and to Bria and to Lori and the whole development team for putting this whole night together. One of the things that made me so happy was that Betham was able to order 300 copies of my book, which is amazing for me. Thank you. But also they were from our local Town and Country Books Inc. bookstore. So it's so great to be able to support a local independent bookstore. So thank you, especially during this time. So welcome to the woods. We are out on the deck, and I thought I would do a little backstory to tell you how I got here and how I arrived at writing cookbooks in the forest. So it all started about 10 years ago. We were living in New York, and John got a job at Betham, and we came out for it. And it was kind of a big shift for me in my career. I had been teaching at a college there and teaching photography and working as a food photographer, and coming out here, it was really kind of like, what am I going to do now? This is like a whole career change for me. And I just started taking photos, and I had always sort of used studio lights for food and a more studio setup, but we were suddenly, just by chance, on a whirlwind weekend, we found a place up on Skyline in Woodside, a little cabin. We thought, we're not married, we don't have kids yet. This sounds like a fun adventure, total 180 from Brooklyn. So we'll try it for a year or two, and then, it lasted about 10. But anyways, this sort of new environment was very inspirational for me. And we had these big sort of foggy, drifts coming in this late afternoon coastal glow, because we're right at the top of the mountain. And that made it possible for me to shoot outside. And I started just taking photos. And at first it was on my dining room table, and I was kind of getting bored of my tablecloth and my napkins and my dishes and everything. And I thought, I'm just going to kind of take this plate of salad outside and see what happens. But my goal was to take photos for a new portfolio. I was hoping to shoot other people's cookbooks, and I was showing my work to editors in San Francisco. And, I was just trying to kind of come up with a new project, and I called it the Forest Feast, because we were out in the forest and I was always cooking up a feast. And everything came from our local CSA farm box, which we were getting through Betham. We still get through Betham. We pick it up once a week, and it's a box of local produce. And I was sort of always reaching for the most colorful item in the box, trying to put together a fresh kind of seasonal dish to share. And I was just posting things on my blog, and after a few months, the blog sort of started to get pick up. And I was getting more views, and eventually, after about 6 months, an agent from New York called me and said, I think you should turn your blog into a book. And I said, oh my God, are you sure? I don't think I'm ready for that. And she said, no, you're ready, and I will help you. So that was really a big shift for me. And I started just cooking up a lot more, and everything I do for the books, and our family is basically vegetarian. So everything is also very simple, because I went to art school, not culinary school. So everything's very, very simple to make. So the first book came out in 2014, took about 9 months to make. Coincidentally, right after that, our first baby was born. And that's The Forest Feast, which came out in 2014. And it's been so much fun. Here, let me show it. Many of you have it. Thank you so much. I've had book signings at Betham. I've had lots of Betham members recipe test for me. Daniel Kasaka, from who I met through Betham, basically laid out my book for me. He was one of my assistants while I was working on this book. And it's been so much fun. So flash forward, having another baby, Max came in 2017. I had a kids book that came out that's an adaptation of The Forest Feast. It's called The Forest Feast for Kids. And I really wanted it to be about kids cooking themselves. And I had some cooking workshops at the cabin. And lots of kids from Bethlehem came and cooked with me. And we took photos, and those photos are in the book, which has been so fun. The Linger Siegel boys, Julia Birdwell, the Sarael girls, the Antevi girls. And then I took some photos at Sunday school one day. There's a photo in the back of the book where there's hands all around like a display of food, and that was from Sunday school at Beth Am. So I just like, Beth Am has been such a big part of my whole career and book and cooking experience, and it's just been really fun, and it continues to be. So thank you. All right, so I think we're going to get started with the first recipe, which is from my most recent book. Rachel, if you wouldn't mind showing the first slide. So in, let's see, in 2017, 2018, Jon had a sabbatical. And so I had just finished my first 3 books. I had an entertaining book that came out after the kids one, and we had a couple months to travel. And I pitched a Mediterranean book to my publisher, and they went for it. So the idea is that California cuisine is so similar to, a lot of the produce that's grown here is very similar to what's grown in the Mediterranean. And we just were in the western part of the Mediterranean. We were in Italy, France, Spain, and Portugal. And our first month was in Barcelona, which was amazing. We even saw some Beth Am members while we were there. The Murads and Pam Shames met us for lunch one day. In fact, one of the recipes in the book, Pam, if you're there, it's based on something that we ate with you. It's a Romanesco sauce that we ordered. So this book was so much fun. We hopped around. I think we stayed in 11 different Airbnbs over the course of 3 months of traveling, almost 3 months. And I just sort of got lots of ideas on the road for different cocktails and dishes. And I made vegetarian versions of everything. And sometimes it was just a recipe that was inspired by a certain ingredient that we saw being grown. For example, there's citrus trees all over Sicily. There you go. On the picture of me on the right side is in an olive grove in Cinque Terre. And actually the cover of the book, I didn't get the cover I wanted while we were on that sabbatical trip. And so I had to go back. I said to my editor, I was like, please tell me that you really need me to go back. So I did get to go back for about 4 days. And I went with my good friend, Jody Porges, who I met through Beth Am. And the two of us went around Cinque Terre. These are shots from Cinque Terre. We saw grapes being harvested for wine. We ordered Aperol spritzes on the beach, which you can see that photo of the spritz on the beach. We watched the sunset on the water. We took this amazing vineyard hike, which is the one on the right of there where I'm sipping in the vineyard of a small family winery, wine production company or business. And anyways, the Aperol spritz I thought would be a fun thing to start with. We saw them all over Italy, and I feel like it's the quintessential Italian drink. And so this is the shot in the book. Rachel, if you can find that slide, it's the grapefruit and thyme Aperol. So it's spritz, which is not a typical way that you would see it probably in Italy. It's my own twist on it. But, typically I'm serving it in a different glass, a shorter kind of tumbler glass. And I think you can really use anything. But in Italy, sitting on, those little sort of a seaside cliff above the water at sunset, everybody's sipping their Aperol. And you see people sipping them out of a large sort of goblet, like a huge wine glass. I'm going to do mine in a stemless, and it's very simple to make. And I think the idea with a lot of my recipes is that you don't really have to do the exact measurements. You can just sort of eyeball it, which is what I do. And I try to make it so that you can't really mess it up. So that's the goal here. So equal parts of these 3 things go into the drink. So it's Aperol, which is a bright colored kind of bitter liqueur, and it's not really, it's an aperitif. And then I like to mix it with a seltzer that has a little bit of a citrus, not a sweet seltzer, just a sparkling water that I like this La Croix pamplemousse flavor. And then some Prosecco. And in the recipe, I use a regular Prosecco, but you could also use rosé Prosecco, which is really fun. So just sort of equal parts of each. I'm going to start out with the Prosecco. And about, 2 ounces of each is about what you probably would need. A little bit of seltzer. Again, just kind of eyeballing it. And the fun happens when you add the Aperol. It's a good color. Yeah. So in Italy, this is often served with a big wheel of orange. It's a very kind of citrus inspired drink. In this case, I love the color of and the flavor of grapefruit. So that's what we're going to use. Grapefruits are usually too big to do an entire wheel. So I'm going to do a half wheel. So I'm just slicing it in half. How pretty that is. I'm often thinking about color in recipes. Obviously, I want it to taste good and I want to pair the right flavors, but I'm often thinking about color just as much because I want it to be pretty, not only for the photos that I'm taking, but also for the experience. I think like the visual experience of eating and drinking is all part of it, and it sort of heightens it. So before you add your garnish, let's add some ice. You can just add any kind of ice. I'm going to use one of these big, these large block ice cubes, and add a little bit of grapefruit. You can even like squeeze a little bit in if you want, a little bit of juice, just a little bit for flavor. Sometimes I like to do this. Lately, we've been getting blood oranges in our CSA, so it's kind of fun to squeeze a blood orange in there. And then thyme. So I love adding fresh herbs to drinks. And I think the idea is not to make it so that you're like drinking a salad, but it's really just for the aroma. So I think when you kind of float it on top and you can just sort of smell it when you're taking that sip, is what it's all about. So you want to kind of come in close there. There is our grapefruit and thyme Aperol spritz. All right, cheers. Is anybody making one at home? I hope so. Are there any questions in the chat? Let's set this off to the side over here. If there, we'll see if there's any questions. If not, I'm going to set up for the next.
Not yet.
Okay, not yet.
No
Ask questions,
so.
everybody. Anybody have questions? Oh yeah. So this is kind of fun for us to do on a Saturday evening. we put the baby to sleep. The boys are watching a show and we're having cocktails on the deck. This is fun. All right, so the next recipe that I'm going to show is the burst tomatoes and torn mozzarella. And this is sort of inspired by, you know, your typical caprese, but it's a little bit of a twist on it. And I get ideas from all kinds of people. I feel like friends I cook with, family I cook with. My cousin, he made these roasted tomatoes like this once. And then I had a similar type of like roasted tomato caprese when we were in Italy. And I just sort of put the ideas together. And I think what makes this special is the capers and lemon zest on top. It's just so simple. It takes like hardly any preparation. And you just kind of sprinkle it on top and it's so flavorful and delicious. So here we go. All right. So I'm actually going to wait on that. So if you're making this at home, I'm going to just show you the first step so that you can put it in the oven and then we'll move to the next recipe and then we'll come back to it. So this is what you do. You want to come in close with the camera. So I found these little tomatoes here. It's so fun if you can find them on the vine. I just found these at Safeway in Sharon Park. So you don't often, you don't see them at all grocery stores, but I think you can find them. And I go with about 2 vines. If you can't find the ones on the vine, they're just sort of pretty for presentation. But if you can't find them, just cherry tomatoes is fine. And you leave them whole. Just put them on a baking sheet and drizzle them with a good amount of olive oil. We went olive oil tasting when we were in Portugal, and I learned a lot about olive oil. Mostly that it's okay to roast with it at a semi-high heat. There's a lot of debate about that, but I end up using olive oil for roasting. So I think it's fine. This goes in at 375 for about 15 to 20 minutes, just until it gets a little bit kind of blistered. So that you don't want them sort of all dried out and melting, but just kind of like warm and juicy and a little bit toasted looking. All right, so we're gonna put those in the oven and then we'll come back. All right, so I'm gonna set up the next recipe, which is a snap pea recipe. All right, so if you wouldn't mind showing the snap pea recipe next, we're gonna prep that while
Sounds like
the
Mandy's
tomatoes
got
are
a
in the oven.
question.
Oh, a question.
Well, before we get too far from the spritz, there was a question in the chat.
Oh,
Could you
okay.
use Campari instead of Aperol?
Sure. Yeah, it's a slightly different drink, but absolutely, it's still spritz. Yeah, I feel like it's very like Campari and soda. I think I also studied abroad in Italy for a year, and there was a lot of Campari and soda drinking in plazas on late afternoons. And I think they don't, I could be wrong, I am not a cocktail connoisseur, but I don't think they typically add, like the Italians typically add Prosecco when it's mixed with Campari, like they do with the Aperol. But I think that might be the difference. The Campari is a little bit more bitter and a little bit more high in alcohol, I think. It's a reddish color instead of Aperol is like an orange color, but they have a very similar feel, that kind of bitter taste, which I really like as an aperitif. It's not for everybody, but I love it. I think it's great, like with an appetizer before dinner. It's really good.
Great, thank you. And then one other question before you get started. Another guest has asked if you could share what your very favorite meal was on this trip.
Oh gosh.
Which is probably an impossible question.
It is. Do you have a favorite one? What would I say? What was the place in Barcelona that was so good?
Every place in Barcelona
was so good, but so many people recommended it. Oh, what was the name of it? It was in the old town of Barcelona. Tapeo. It's called Tapeo, and about 7 people recommended that we go there, and we did, and it was really delicious. It's sort of modern tapas, but they didn't feel so modern that you couldn't like recognize them. So, oh
Tile
gosh.
Museum.
What's that?
Tile Museum.
Oh yeah, the Tile Museum. That was a good one. So in Portugal, the Museu de Azuela, I think is how you say Azuelo, the Tile Museum in Lisbon, has an amazing kind of garden restaurant that you can have lunch at if you're at the museum. And just the setting is so beautiful. I always kind of have a hard time deciding if my best food memories are about the ambiance or the food. But that was definitely one of the best ambiances, I think. Yeah. All right. So let's do the next salad. So this is a really fresh salad. I call it the shaved snap pea salad. And you just start with some, we're getting these sugar snap peas in our CSA right now, our farm box. So if you want to come in closer, I'm just set this aside. This is what we're aiming for. I prepped some in advance, but with the peas, you just sort of have to use your knife and trim both ends and pull the strings off. This is a little bit time consuming, but it is very simple. You can just put a podcast on, put some music on, have a spritz and go for it. It's sort of meditative. Betham Shabbat services. There you go. But the idea here, which I'm always trying to think of interesting ways to cut things. And I think it's fun to try and cut these on the diagonal. So I have a little diagram on the recipe itself you can show. I try to, so my recipes are always full page, full color. And if you can see down in the bottom corner there, I have like a little painting. So I guess that's another part of the story of the forest feast, what sort of sets it apart and makes it different, is that I always love to do watercolor illustrations. But I always kind of thought like you had to have, like as a person who wanted to go into a career with art, I always thought like I had to choose something. So I chose to be a photographer, but I always loved the illustration side of things too. But I thought, oh, I can't be an illustrator. I've chosen to be a photographer. So notice how I'm getting these really nice little kind of diagonal pieces. It's sort of what you're aiming for. And as thin as you can. But I think creatively, it was really sort of pivotal for me when we first got to the cabin to have a little bit of time where I wasn't hustling. And it was a real shift for me to be able to, John was at work every day. I was sort of unpacking. We didn't have kids yet. And I didn't have a job. And I was sort of like trying to figure out what I was going to do with my life. But also, it gave me time to kind of creatively experiment in a way that I just never had time for, except for maybe like in grad school. But it was a really important time for me to be able to play around. And I think that time allowed me to add these illustrations to the recipe pages. So that's sort of when I was starting out, I was always posting 2 images together. So it's always like a photo of my first book is always like a photo of the recipe of the ingredients on one side, kind of with a diagram. I use my handwriting. This is all, I've painted these titles right here in watercolor. This is my handwriting here. And I try to like, you know, kind of illustrate the steps to make it really easy, because I want people to look at the photo and just like have a very quick sense of like, could I make this at home right now? Do I have the ingredients on hand? It's not too much to read through. I want it to be very approachable and not intimidating. So that's why, and I feel like I'm a very visual person, and I want it to just, the whole experience to be very simple. So that's why I try to lay everything out in a really colorful and visual way. But yeah, so I try to include that in all the books, all the little illustrations, but just being able to say, okay, I don't have any clients, please, I'm not, you know, doing a school assignment, nothing, I can do whatever I want, allowed me to have that time to sort of be able to experiment and overlay the illustrations on top of the photos. And I think that's what really visually set the books apart. So that was a good time. All right, so now I'm gonna get my other ingredients. So this is, I try to keep things around 5 ingredients if I can, but the other things that we need are grated Parmesan, pine nuts, pitted dates, chopped mint, olive oil, and then lemon juice and black pepper. So let me grab my other ingredients. So also for this book, for each of the books, I try to, the first book was all kind of like vintage floral pottery and dishes that I was finding at flea markets. And I try to give each book a slightly different aesthetic in terms of styling, but I get to do the whole process myself, which I was really lucky with my publisher. They let me do all the parts. I do the shooting, I do the recipe development, I do the writing, I lay out every page, I do the text, I do kind of like all of it. But it feels like one big art project for me. So anyways, it was fun to think about the dishes in different ways. So I really tried to collect a lot of Italian and Portuguese and Spanish pottery for the photos that I was taking. So like this snap pea photo, I have the dish right here. Yep. So there's the dish that's in this photo right here. But this one belonged to my grandmother. She bought it in, I think on her honeymoon actually, in like the 50s in Italy. And I have a whole set of it. So that was really fun to shoot with in the book. Sheba Solomon at Betham loaned me a bunch of her pieces. She's a potter, and she loaned me some of the pieces that she had made, plus some other pieces from her pottery collection that she had at home. I borrowed a big box of pottery and shot with it all and then returned it to her. So that was really fun. Yeah, so I'm always trying to think visually how not only to present it if somebody's coming over for dinner, but also how it's going to look in the photos. All right, so I'm just gonna, I have my, if you can see the close-up shot, so I have all my diagonally sliced snap peas. I'm gonna add about 2 tablespoons of grated Parmesan cheese. Let's see, and you can totally eyeball this. About 3 tablespoons of pine nuts. Just put all of those in. And then we're gonna chop a little bit of mint and a few dates. This over. All right, so just a little bit of mint. We're growing some fresh mint, which is fun to use.
Any questions, Mandy?
Yes, we have a really good question, which is, how do you test your recipes, and do you need any testers?
Yes and yes. Okay, so I've had a lot of people from Betham actually help test for all of the books. In this Mediterranean book, pull up the list here. There's so many people. Okay, so Stacey Mason and her daughter Eliza Cohen tested for the Mediterranean book. Jody Porges from Betham, Martha Bixby, Laura Keller, several people from Bethlehem tested for this Mediterranean book, which is so fun. And now I'm working on a 5th book, which is the Forest Feast the Forest Feast road trip, which is all about taking a road trip in California. And I have several people from Bethlehem who we've just sort of wrapped up testing for that, but I sent out all the information in the request in my newsletter. And I got several people from Bethlehem who tested for me, like Donna Seidel, Susie Block, Leslie Braun, Jody Porges, again, Laura Keller. Oh, Jenna Sanders, I think, tested for the Mediterranean book. So fun. So anyways, it's really fun to have.
And others.
Yeah, so many others. I'm sorry if I'm forgetting some, but it's
Can I
been really
ask
fun to.
I have a couple of questions on the recipe too.
Yeah.
So question was, are the pine nuts roasted?
Oh, good question. I do not toast them. They probably would be better if you toasted them, just in a pan. I bought them, they're straight out of the container that I bought them in, but you can certainly like just toast them in a pan dry for like a minute until you sort of smell the nuttiness and they get slightly golden. That does add flavor. I didn't do it tonight though.
Okay, great. And then do you have a non-dairy recommendation for replacing the cheese?
Oh, that's a good one. I think you can just leave it out. A lot of people use the nutritional yeast as like sort of a cheese replacement. I've never tried that in this recipe, but it could be good. They're kind of like these umami flavored flakes, nutritional yeast, but I think you can just leave it out. Yeah, I don't think you really need it.
Book.
Yeah, I am thinking about doing a vegan book, and I always get requests for vegan and gluten-free alternatives and substitutions. And in the back of the book, there's a whole, like in the index, you can search by gluten-free or vegan. Yes. Okay. So I think we have everything in here. We're going to add our dressing. Oh, the dates. We need the dates. I'm just going to roughly chop the dates, about 6 dates. But in terms of the recipe testing, I test everything myself, obviously. And then it's just friends and family testers.
And Erin, do you have a favorite Parmesan cheese that you like to use?
I don't.
So whatever they choose is okay.
I don't. Yeah. I try to always find, ingredients that are at my local grocery store. I realize that I'm in California where I have a lot of extra things available that people in other parts of the country might not, but, or in other parts of the world. But sometimes I get an idea for a recipe, and if I go to the grocery store and they don't have that ingredient, I just don't, I change it to something else. Cause I'm like, if I can't get it, they definitely can't get it. So, I don't want to have to go to 3 stores. Sometimes I use special things, but I try to give substitutions for, in case you can't find it. All right, let me grab my dressing. Right, a little salt and pepper.
It's cold up here, everybody.
Okay, so we're gonna have just a little bit of lemon juice, a lot of black pepper. I love black pepper in this. But basically the dressing is just olive oil, lemon juice, black pepper, and a little salt. This is a really great olive oil. It's more of like a finishing oil, but these 2 women I know started this company called Primary. They're in San Francisco, and it's really delicious. A better quality olive oil that has like a really nice flavor. And a little bit of lemon juice. You can sort of dress it to taste, but the the Parmesan really adds a nice saltiness, so you don't need too much salt. But I'm gonna add a little bit more of my other olive oil. But once it looks sort of nicely coated, you're good to go. This is a really nice crunchy salad. I think the dates add like a nice sweetness. You have the sour kind of tartness from the lemon and a little bit of crunch from the nuts. And it also does really well made in advance in your fridge. That's like sort of a green salad alternative. So let's put it in here. There we go. Same as the book.
Awesome.
Erin, one of our guests would like to know if you hung out with Stanley Tucci in Italy.
Oh no, that would be amazing. I wish. Oh, I love it. But it was fun as we were traveling. So my book, I feel very lucky that it is in 10 languages worldwide. And when we were traveling, we saw it in all those languages on bookshelves in like Portuguese and Italian, French, and Spanish. And it was fun to be able to see that. So
It's not in Hebrew yet.
Not in Hebrew yet, but that would be amazing. All right, so we're going to shift back to our last recipe, which is the burst tomatoes. All right, so grab a platter. Hopefully the tomatoes come out okay. Let's look at ours. You can see they're just like slightly kind of wilted and blackened. You can see the up close. And you can just put them out on a platter. And you can serve this with a little spoon and a fork, but they look so pretty on the vine when they're roasted. And they get sort of extra sweet and caramelized. And then I think my favorite way to do the bread is to fry it in a pan. If you have time, it takes a little bit of extra time, but just in olive oil in a frying pan, it's so good. It just like creates a much better texture than toasting it. But
you could grill it.
You can grill it too. Yeah, coat it with olive oil, a little salt. Okay, so the idea is that you take your ball of fresh mozzarella and you just sort of tear it into kind of pieces that are rustic looking. And then put it alongside, and you really douse it afterwards in olive oil to make it so that you could use a spoon and just sort of scoop it up onto a piece of bread. But about 4 ounces of cheese, which is a little less than probably what you buy in a ball. We're going to do about that much. And the flavor really comes from the zested lemon. And I bought an organic lemon, just so that I know that there's not any spray on this skin here.
I'm sure so many people have lemon trees. That
oh my gosh, so many people have lemon trees.
Or persimmons or oranges.
Well, there's a persimmon salad in my book that was inspired by visiting a Betham member, Topher Simon, who gave me a big bag of his free persimmons from his tree. I ended up cooking with them, and it went in the first book. Now we make that every year at Thanksgiving. All right, so a little bit of lemon zest and some capers, which adds that nice kind of salty pickled flavor. It's also so good with the creamy mozzarella and the caramelized tomatoes, and a little bit of salt and pepper. I like the really flaky salt. The Malden brand is really good. You can find it at most grocery stores. Just kind of like a finishing salt. It's much better right before you take a bite than like a kosher salt, I find. Then we're going to go for the really good olive oil and just really douse it. It should be like almost like a sauce that you're scooping up and putting it on your bread. And that's it. I think that's it, right? Did I miss anything? I don't think so. So there we go. There's our final 2 dishes. And our cocktail. And there we go. Cheers, everybody. Are there any more questions?
Everything looks beautiful. We'd like to, the food is fabulous, of course, and we're enjoying it. I'm getting very hungry. Someone asked about your beautiful flower arrangement.
Oh, right here?
Yeah.
Oh, well, those are grocery store flowers with things I found in the yard. I feel like I'm always going out in the yard taking clippings of whatever's growing and adding it to grocery store flowers, but these are some sort of mums.
Have you ever clipped something from the Beth?
Oh.
Sorry, Rach. Sorry, house committee.
Well, we've had so many nice dinners at Betham pre-COVID dinner parties, and there's been a couple of times where I decorated like a long table for the young adult orchard group and decorated it with maybe a few clippings from Betham.
All right. Any other questions, Mandy?
How long does it take to get down the hill to the grocery store?
Oh, good question. Probably like less than 15 minutes, I think. Yeah. We're right near, at the top near Alice's restaurant. So our closest big grocery store is Safeway in Sharon Park, and it's probably like less than 15 minutes. Yeah. We also have a little bodega at Alice's, which is, you know, we can walk there if we really need something.
But we get most of our fruits and vegetables from the CSA.
We do. Yeah. Yeah. Every week at Betham. Everybody should sign up for it. It's so good. We were just reading about one of the farmers that grew the strawberries that came this week and how he treats his workers so well. And it's like such a nice story. So.
And Erin, remind us when your next book is expected to come out.
Yeah. So the Forest Feast Road Trip, we're just wrapping the recipe testing and editing for it. And it comes out this time next year. So probably April 2022. And I'm sure we'll definitely have some events in this area. I always let people know about them on social and via my email newsletter. But Shauna Midler from Betham connected me to the small gift shop in Woodside called Emily Joubert. She knew the owner and connected me, and she's hosted 2 of my book signings so far. So we always have something there, which is really fun.
Okay, so the questions continue to come in. One is,
I love it.
do your kids eat most of what you make?
Oh, good question. No, they don't.
No.
Oh dear, Winnie, who just turned 1, will eat a lot more than the boys will. They're 4 and 6, and they are vegetable lovers in training. I like to tell myself that they will grow up to be adults who eat vegetables, but at the moment they do eat several. But like this, they would probably not eat. They will eat sugar snap peas, but not with all this mixed into it. And they will eat tomatoes, but probably not roasted.
So
Like
we're starting they love the things they grow.
That's true. Yeah, we have a small garden. In fact, we started growing, gardening at Betham early on, and even had some dinners there. We had like a Shavuot there in the garden, and Ezra was really little, and he went to the preschool. Max goes to the preschool now, still there, and they will eat things that they have grown. So I've noticed that helps. Like at the preschool, they grew Romanesco, and Ezra to this day will still eat Romanesco, which is like a sort of type of cauliflower broccoli. So
Debbie.
with Debbie. Yeah.
Erin, can you tell us a little bit more about the CSA, what it's called, and how people might learn about it?
Sure. Yeah, it's called Eating with the Seasons. They deliver to Betham every Thursday, right? And it's great. It's sort of like a culmination of a few different farms that are all, I think, within, I don't know how many miles, but like within like an hour and a half of here. So some of them do come from like the Watsonville area. But the nice part about it is like there's different like membership subscriptions. So we have, I think, an 8-item subscription, and every week they send you an email and they tell you what's available, like what's been grown, what's in season, and you can choose your 8 items, but then you can add on a la carte additional items too. But
we can put the link in the next Betham Shabbat newsletter. I'll make sure that it goes in that link so people can find Eating with the Seasons.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Perfect. And how does someone get on your newsletter?
Oh, just on my website. A little window pops up. If you could just go to theforestfeast.com, a little window will pop up that says newsletter.
And
I send it out like once or twice a month.
And I'll say, for those of you who use Instagram, Erin has a beautiful feed with wonderful photographs, family photos, recipe photos, travel photos. It's really fun to follow. So I highly recommend that as well.
What are you making for Shavuot?
Ezra keeps talking about cheesecake. I don't know if I've ever made cheesecake, to be honest. I'm sure we'll have a good cheese bladder, probably ice cream.
Any more questions before we conclude? I think we covered everything that was posted in the chat. Lots of happy cookers out there and admirers. So thank you, Erin.